So there are two minor things that I wanted to point out. One was a tweet by Paul Graham about people going back to the office. And the other thing was a Usenet post from Amazon, from Jeff Bezos, 1994, looking for engineers. These are two smaller things. And then we have some larger topics. What about self-healing code, which is something that really interests me. And another topic about metrics and engineering metrics. That's, I think, something interesting. And data about product and engineer ratios in startups, because that's also something that's interesting me, because from time to time, I have the feeling people just decide on a whim how many engineers they need or what's the ratio between product manager and engineer. And everyone does something else.
When you said Usenet, I was like, wow, man, this took me back to when I set up South Africa's first NNTP server.
Oh my.
Because, the bandwidth issues, I joined the CSIR, which was the Scientific Research Foundation, para-governmental organization. And two of the first things I did when I joined, it's funny how my branding mind thought. I was like, hey, we could put the csr.co.za's domain on the map if all these students and kids are connecting to IRC server and an NNTP server based in, and so we will just suck down the articles and cache it locally to South Africa's network, and then people could connect locally. And both those ideas worked beautifully.
And it was such an amazing world, I think, at least to me back then, beginning of the 90s, when I was hacking around on the VEX, on VMS and IRC and Usenet, and talking to people in English for the first time, and like staying up at night so we can chat with people in the US. So that was it opened so many things. So very interesting. And I found a link to Amazon's first engineering hire, essentially, which says something like, seek extremely talented C and Unix developers. So I thought that's interesting because it seek extremely talented. That's already something that's quite high. I don't know if that was the usual lingo back then, and we just came down a little bit, or it was already something that stuck out. And the second thing I found out, I really like looking at these old things. There's also a Usenet post somewhere about Google with some Java questions, how to do some Java stuff. It's also that floats around. But then in this Amazon news post, there was also the in the signature of Jeff Bezos was, it's easier to invent the future than to predict it from LNK. Which is also something funny, I think, because in 1994, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, well, no one knew these. And then having this line as in your signature, and then essentially going on to kind of invent the cloud and kind of invent e-commerce and all of these stuff.
Yes.
So that was really looking into the future.
That is interesting. I think for our listeners, I'm going to just read Jeff Bezos. I have it open here. August 21st, 1994. Jeff Bezos wrote, well-capitalized startup seeks extremely talented C, C++, Unix developers to help pioneer commerce on the internet. You must have experience designing and building large and complex, yet maintainable, in brackets, systems. And you should be able to do so in about 1/3 the time that most competent people think possible. You should have a bachelor's in science, master's in science, or a PhD in computer science or the equivalent. Top-notch communication skills are essential. Familiarity with web servers and HTML would be helpful, but is not necessary. Expect talented, motivated, intense, and interesting coworkers. Must be willing to relocate to the Seattle area. Of course, in brackets, we will help cover moving costs. Your compensation will include meaningful equity ownership.
Oh, I moved that one. Oh my.
Send resume and cover letter to Jeff Bezos. Wow. And if anybody wants Jeff's fax number, 206-828-0951. Oh, and this was when it was still Cadabra Inc. I remember he wanted to call Amazon Cadabra. Wow, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I thought that fascinating too. I think we forget too much history in our field. So I'm also someone who likes these tidbits about history. Yeah,
I love Jonathan Wolfson's response to that thread, December 6th, 2004, at 9:30 in the morning. Jeff, is this Amazon? Are you still hiring? I love it.
So that I think actually it's kind of nice to learn something also from this. With this extremely talented, and you need to be faster than everyone else. And so already shooting for the moon.
Yeah.
Or aiming for them.
Yeah, what strikes me about that job post, super simple.
Yes.
He didn't give a 15 bullet point list of what he's looking for. I feel like in that little paragraph, again, unformatted paragraph, I feel like I know exactly what he was looking for.
Yes.
And I mean, he hits on complexity. He hits on who your team is going to be. He hits on compensation. Yep. He hits on some of the challenges you're going to face. So I think I love that you found that. I think that is a good thing for us to keep in mind, like you said, to think about how it was done.
Yes.
Cool. How about Paul Graham's tweet about remote work?
Do you want to read it? Should I read it? Because you're a good reader, so.
Okay, let me see if I can read it. Scrolling through tweet of the week. So Paul Graham tweeted, I've talked to multiple founders recently who have changed their minds about remote work and are trying to get people back to the office. I doubt things will go all the way back to the way they were before COVID, but it looks like they will go most of the way back.
I wrote in Usenet I don't agree, but I think it's interesting. I think I agree with the motivation behind this. I'm an office guy. I did a lot of management by walking around, talking to people, building relationships, and all of that. So I'm an office guy, and I like office. I like interacting with people, and remote work is not. I'm not as a developer. Remote work is fine, but as a manager, I thought it's demanding. So I can understand this on one hand, but I think to me, the genie is out of the bottle. I don't think you can, it's like giving people a gift essentially for free. Like you can stay at home, no more commutes. And I think it's a huge gift, which was given for free. And now you want to get it back. And like if you give a gift to someone and then want to have it back, that usually doesn't work. So it might work if you have a big lever. Perhaps if you're Google or if you're some really, really great company with a great brand recognition or great employer branding. But I think otherwise people will not come back. But that's just my prediction. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think so. I had a pretty lonely moment at my pool last week. You know, I have a nice pool. We have a nice house in Southern California. And I'm actually shocked at where I am today. I was actually telling someone on the phone this last night. I was thinking, I'm actually horrified at the fact that I am in my house every day. You know, if just like we reflected on Jeff Bezos' post from many years ago, if I just reflect on how I built 7 CTOs and how I built my startups before that, and if I think about the location-bound constraint that we all gave each other, we were all sort of in the habit of, okay, yes, we all have to work together in the same place if we want to work. And it was like oh my goodness, don't forget to jump on Skype because that guy who works for us out of Indiana also needs to feel like he's in
Yeah.
the office, And I was at my pool last week thinking, wow, I am really just sort of going between my office and walking around the house, doing stuff with the kids and then back in the house. And I thought to myself, this can't be healthy for me. Even on a cognitive level, I can understand the freedom that you're talking about. The fact that no one expects me to fly somewhere or be in an office, that feels amazing. That part feels really great. The autonomy that I want to feel, especially in the tech industry, I think a lot of us love the idea of the autonomy that technology gives us, programming from anywhere and stuff like that. But it can't be healthy. It just can't be healthy for me. Day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, to have the predominant social context to be that I am alone.
I feel in a similar way. There is a sci-fi novel where people are essentially only talking to each other in a remote way. And after some centuries, they can't stand each other. So they can't approach each other because they just have so accustomed to being alone that it creates, it's repulsive to be in the same room with someone else. And in that sci-fi novel, a murder happens, and then how can that happen if people can't see each other? I also think it can't be healthy spending a lot of time alone in your desk. I would think, nevertheless, I've commuted in Berlin, and it was grueling. It was like a commute, and I also would not like that back. Spending 2 hours a day. So I'm kind of on the fence. I think what Paul Graham makes in some other tweets to this, that essentially something like innovation doesn't happen. So what people see is with this remote work, there is no serendipity, there is no innovation happening. I'd rather think we will find new ways to interact. Like some of my coaches, that tech team is in a Zoom call all day. So the team is in one Zoom call all day, so they can interact and feel the other person. So I think we will develop new technology to get back what we have lost without going on a commute.
Yes, which if you think about the Zoom call all day, we weren't all sitting in each other's cubicles all day. Like, even the Zoom call all day gives you a super upgraded access to each other because, yes, you could sort of shout at someone across the room or you could call someone over to your desk. But, that was all very, again, location bound, even in the same buildings. But now you can sort of be in the same building. What I mean is you can now have a Zoom access to just the right people on your team, which I think that is an upgrade. But something you said that I really like is, I wish I can remember what you said, sort of new ways of interaction.
Yes.
And I think that's where, I think that's where the problem lies here, is it's not an either or situation. It doesn't have to be, we need to go back to the way it was before COVID. I just think we should not be lazy in inventing new ways to interact. There's one startup that I'm helping, and at least once a quarter, there's some event that they've organized for us to go to. And I feel highly energized when I leave those 2 or 3 days of an intense sort of experience. It's not operational, really. If you are a remote first company and you arrange retreats or get-togethers, you should not see it as an operational thing. You should see it as a building thing, or as a creative thing, or as a relational thing. But don't see it as we're going to open the backlog and we're going to groom it and no. That's the stuff that you can do in operations mode. But I like to think of those retreats as way like it's a build. It's like we're building relationship. We're building new ideas. We are building space and openness. And I think you're right. I think that's where I also don't agree with this tweet in the sense of people have to go back to the office to somehow be creative. I think that's just lazy. I think that's a lazy way of seeing things.
Yeah, I think we're just in the very, very beginning. We have no clue what's going to happen. We have no clue what's going to be invented with these new constraints. I think a lot of inventions happen when there are constraints, and now we have this constraint of people not being in the same place. And I think this would spur some kind of innovation. I'm waiting for a process innovation. To me, like Scrum doesn't work. Scrum is very intensive on meetings, which is somehow fine if everyone is in the same office, and it works with Zoom, but I think it's too heavy on meetings. It's not really a remote first process, and we're not. It's very good for the internet, so it came at the right time. A lot of companies went into the internet. A lot of development happened beginning of the 2000s. So Scrum came at the exactly right time to ride that wave. Kanban came a little bit later, before, but later in software development usually, and also rode that wave. But I think they both are not, and Scrum particularly are not suited for remote environments. But we don't know. From my point of view, we don't know what's going to happen.
I agree.
And trying to predict the future is like I had philosophy at the university, and I was doing a lot of Popper, and like there was one of the basic ideas is you can't predict the future. And so trying to make like these predictions that this is bad, so we need to go back, is, I don't know. It doesn't resonate with me. But I thought that tweet was important. A lot of things that Paul Graham says are important, even if I don't agree.
Yes.
So that's the reason I shared it.
I love it.
Another topic would be self-healing code, which is something interesting because I run some smaller project on my own, currently in Go. I have a little bit of self-healing in it. I use system D to restart if something happens. I also restart all projects every 24 hours. So because Go is so fast and starting up, there's a problem in restarting just a server every 24 hours. And they will run very well. So I'm interested in self-healing code, and the idea of the article there was, it was on the Stack Overflow blog. And the idea of the article was that AI could help with self-healing codes in several ways. And the simple thing they suggested was, and showed some images and shared some articles, that AI creates code review patches based on developer feedback. So I say, you could do this and that, and then the AI automatically creates a patch and changes. So that was one of the ideas. And the other was reading error messages from a log file, and then also automatically creating patches and redeploy the system without the errors. So I thought that was an interesting take on what AI could not autocomplete, and not generating code, but helping with bugs and automatically healing things. So I thought that was interesting. It could be something that's relevant in the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's also something I think that as CTOs or as VPs in our quest to deliver great code, better quality, maybe increased velocity in where reasonable, this does seem like a very interesting thing to be discussing with the teams and to excavate with the teams. I love the idea of being able to review PRs with sort of the natural language and then having that code sort of generated.
What strikes me when I look at AI generated code at ChatGPT, it's much better at the edge cases. I think developers perhaps are like me, perhaps are lazy to think about all the edge cases. You don't want to get things done. You want to let things happen. You don't want to be stuck with one feature for a long time, looking at all the edge cases and all the error handling and all of that stuff. but the AI doesn't care. So whenever I generate code with an AI, what's very different from the code I write is that there's so much more error handling. And that's when I say to ChatGPT, I tell ChatGPT, generate some tests. It generates much more tests with more edge cases. It's not, it doesn't care how boring this is.
Yes. Yes.
So it's much, much better there. And I think that could help with self-healing also with, because a lot of errors are because there's no edge case test.
I mean, if you're like, hey, I've got to go review 12 PRs, or, there's a 500-line PR, or in some cases, thousands of lines.
Yes.
Which, of course, I don't endorse that, but that does happen.
We would not.
The ChatGPT isn't going to say, oh my goodness, I have to review all this code. I want to go to the beach, or my brain is fried. The thing that just strikes me right now is this idea of reading code. If I am contributing code, I tend to read the parts of the code that I feel is relevant to the change I want to make.
Yes.
I'm not going to go and sit back and read everything to understand the context and, what did this developer try and do? I'm basically going to say, there's this bug, or there's this feature I've been asked to add. Where can I plug it in? And, there's some constraints or some interface design. Okay, I'm going to make sure that my interface is correct. And, but it's biased, I think, towards the change you want to make. So I feel like you do the minimal effort in a good way. Not in a malicious way is what I'm saying. To facilitate the change. Whereas with ChatGPT, that just has all the code in its brain and knows everything about the code base, it just seems normal for me that it would be able to then produce more relevant changes. And what I want to say is, what I think is an interesting paradigm shift here is that developers are going to be required to read more code. Actually, I want to ask your opinion on that. It feels to me like if the code assists are writing chunks of code, that is something that was blank before, but now there's code. So now instead of you writing code and sort of reading ahead or reading behind as you write, you're actually going to be presented with 500 lines of code that was auto-generated, which means that your reading skill is going to have to improve. So I wonder if there's going to have to be a paradigm shift for developers to actually learn how to enjoy reading code. What do you think?
I think, partially yes. Partly I would agree. One very important thing about writing code is reading code. That's something that I think a lot of people during hiring neglect. And the hiring is oftentimes totally focusing on generating code. Like, write me something like, I don't know, write me a string reverse is something I ask. And so it's very focused on generating, on writing skills. It seldom focuses on reading skills. And some of the coaches, my coaches that are very successful in hiring, focus more on reading skills and writing skills. So I think that's very important. On the other hand, I have the feeling that we already went through this, because like 20 years ago, I was a research assistant and a consultant. We were doing aspect-oriented unified modeling language code generated into Java. So you could draw some stuff up, do some aspects around it, and then code was generated. And the problem with all of these case tool and code generation back then was that no one could read the code and no one wanted to read the generated code. So I'm not sure, but exactly your point is something that's in this article, which says, Google says, we will generate much more code, so we need to deal with this. I'm not so sure, because we went that way and it didn't work. So probably we tuned the AI models to make the minimal amount of changes that have some effect, and try to have AI models that are not noisy. So that was something I would thing happens, that we really train AI models to be to the point and not very noisy, because otherwise you run into the problem that you do need to read a lot of code, or you just throw your hands up in the air and say, oh, I just trust AI. So who am I? Let's just deploy. That might also be, that's something like the jump from C to Java. In C, you had this malloc and free stuff. And then you went to Java, you needed to let go of memory management and just say, okay, the VM which doesn't create any problems. VM knows best. So let's let the garbage collector run and then do all these memory things. I don't care anymore. And that was a huge jump for some people. Perhaps you have the same job with AI. Then some people say, oh, I don't care what the AI does. Probably right. Or creating bugs, but less bugs than I do. So where are we going?
Yeah, so from this article, the CEO at Stack Overflow just recently announced that they have an internal team dedicated to exploring how AI and the generative AI can improve the platforms and products at Stack Overflow, which we all know Stack Overflow sort of is in a bit of a Rubicon moment, I think.
Yes. Traffic dropped.
Yeah.
The point is that something I preach from the trees for some months, years now, is that every company needs a team of people who look at AI and work with AI. So I found that interesting when I read that they are doing this, something that I suggest everyone should do. But still, very, very few people to currently do this.
I love it. For those who don't know, which includes me, this self-healing code that doesn't refer to the idea of code writing itself. It's more being able to identify areas of the code that need to be fixed, or sort of. I just want to make sure I capture colloquially what self-healing code actually means.
I think self-healing code in this article means more the way we would understand it. In the past, it was a lot of restarting, for example, a lot of Kubernetes restarts. If you look at self-healing code, it was a lot about automatic rollbacks and things, but not code that wrote code to heal itself.
Got it.
In this article, it's more the AI really writes new code as a patch, applies the patch without the bug, so fixes the bug automatically, and then redeploys. So we're more... It's not the code itself healing itself, but or the code healing itself. It's an AI healing the code with the bug and redeploying. But it's a step closer, I think, to what we would naively understand by itself.
Yes. So can I dream a little bit where a code base is deployed to production, an internal server error happens or an unhandled exception happens, the ghost in the machine sees that, goes to the code where that's happening, fixes it, and deploys it. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, exactly. That's like, this I think it's happening in the next 5 years. Something that I'm also interested in is the ratio of product managers and data scientists towards developers and engineers. And there's an article that from people they scraped LinkedIn for companies profiles, and then created ratios between how many product managers are there compared to engineers. So I found that very interesting, because of my coaches and all the CTOs I meet, they just do it like, that's one of the question. How many coaches ask me, how many product managers should I have for an engineer? Like, is it 2 engineers per product manager, which is something I prefer, or is it 6 engineers per product manager? So that's something that's an open question, and everyone does something different. So I'm very interested in real numbers and seeing what company does. And my takeaway from this article is there is no consensus. So there's all over, the numbers are all over the place, from very high product management to development ratio to very low ones.
What I love about the article, it's from Sync, SYNQ. What I loved about the 50 sort of, the thing that they saw was there are data first companies.
Yes.
So large data teams relative to engineering teams, and they typically have business models where data directly contributes to the bottom line, like Tinder, DoorDash, Instacart. Then you have product-first companies such as Personio, Checkout.com, Cover Genius. They have relatively larger product teams. And then you have engineering-first organizations that are predominantly platform and development-heavy companies, such as obviously GitLab, Rippling, these companies. And it says in many cases they have engineers carry out part of the job that overlaps with what the product and the data team would normally do. So, I mean, I think it's important to recognize, and I think this is kind of what you said, which is there isn't a rule. You are a certain type of company that just requires certain disciplines, and that in that discipline, the ratio could be important.
Yes. But I think it also numbers all over the place. I always think a car manufacturer knows the ratios of people in a factory, and it might be very different from Volkswagen to Tesla. Tesla may do things very different in an unorthodox way, and sometimes struggles and sometimes succeeds with this unorthodox way. But I think in general, car makers have a feeling, and perhaps it's a bad thing, I don't know, but they have a feeling how the ratio between people is. And it might be on one hand that in tech, the companies are so different and the business is so different that there is no accepted way to have developers and product managers and QA and stuff. Or we as an industry might be so immature that we don't know what we're doing. So I'm not sure where we're falling. Are we very special? Like when I talk to HR usually, and I say, and they want to do something, and I talk to HR, and I say, we can't do this. And then they say, yeah, I know engineering is different. We can't do this with engineering. We do it with everyone else, but we don't. So perhaps engineering is kind of different. But I don't know. I have a little bit of the gut feeling that it's also a little bit of immaturity that we don't know what we're reading. And there was another point in this article that I also found very interesting, which is the number of engineers. A little bit down on the article is the number of engineers versus the company size. And I think the top one was 37% or something of people in the company being engineers. And that's something that's also interesting to me because some of my coaches, they have 10% engineering on board. And still the CEO thinks they are a tech company.
Yes.
And I would challenge that. Like if you have 10% tech in your company and 90% others, are you really a tech company? Or, I mean, it could be that your engineers are really, really excellent, like the guys that Jeff Bezos is hiring. And then perhaps you can have 10% engineers and be a tech company. So that could be. But I don't know. I'd say if you wouldn't have 10% tech, you're not a tech company. Don't kid yourself.
I love that. I love that because I think that sometimes even as CTOs, because our whole lives we have been resource constrained, I think we are very good at doing a lot with a little. We do more with less. I think there isn't enough money in the budget. We'll just do it ourselves.
Yes.
The developer's not available on the weekend. I'll just code it myself. I think we are used to doing more with less. And I will not be surprised, especially in smaller startups. By that, I mean teams of 40 developers or less, 50 developers or less, that we are probably understaffed. And the CTO is blissfully unaware of the fact that they need to be fighting for more budget, get more people on the team. And the reason, by the way, the reason your quality is downhill, velocity is downhill, you can't keep your engineers, technical debt is rising, the process is always breaking, expectations are never met, the scope is always creeping. These are all things that probably you don't have enough people helping with the demands that the business is putting on the engineering team. And I think the CTO, the more naive CTO, again, no malice, but they just don't realize that they should be in that C-suite fighting, warring, battle crying for more people.
Yeah. And like, if you're a startup for HR, I would take a look at Personio, for example, and look what percentage of people at Personio are engineers. So I might shoot myself in the knee. I don't know, might be low. Then I take back everything I said. But if like, you should aim for the same percentage that Personio has. And if you don't, for whatever reasons, like if you have less engineers than Personio or more engineers, I think you would need to have a reason for that and say, okay, because we're hiring only the best, like the best of the best, so we need less. Or we hire below average because we need to hire very, very fast. Everyone who applies, we are hiring. That would be a reason to have more. But I think you need to have a reason for having a higher percentage of engineers if you're an HR startup with Personio, or a lower percentage of engineers. You know, so that's something, a discussion I would take away from this article. Look at the industry, say HR tech, Personio, how many engineers do they have? What percentage of engineers do they have? And then go to the CEO and say, look, this is who we compete with. How could we compete with them with less engineering talent?
I really love that. So I want to run something by you, which is something I have sort of started deducing, which is the younger your company, the higher the percentage of your spend needs to be on engineers. And I kind of tell people 50% of your spend should be on engineers, and then it can gradually go down to maybe 40%. Ish. But and I think this article is helping me realize, hey, I can't make a broad statement like that because there might be data-driven, product-driven, or engineering-driven organizations. But I think if we can pin the spend to something, a company number. So, like you said earlier, the number of people. I like to maybe think of revenues. Like if you're making $1 million MRR. Is it really the end of the world to say that you need to spend $500K a month on dev? No, I don't think it's wrong. Or, I think but the thing is, then you talk to the company and they're like, no, we spend $150K a month on engineers. I'm like, what? What are you doing?
And especially, that's a very interesting point you make, because it's something I recognized, or something that's irked me in the past, is that the ratio of people an early startup is hiring is often wrong. And they hire too much marketing, for example, or they hire HR people. And then these people do things before there is a product, and they want to do things. I see they want to do marketing. They want to do this and this. They want to do the things they are good at, but there is not yet a product. So they don't know how to promote it and what to promote. And, they always, but there is this model of this S-curve of a product adoption. And then you essentially, in the beginning, you have a genesis phase where you find out, before there's the MVP, you find out what could be the product. And then you have the MVP, and then you go to product market fit, and then there is scaling. And the ratio of people you have in the company should reflect the phase you're in. And if you hire people like marketing for scaling, or like a COO for scaling, when you're before product market fit, and I totally get it that you want to be scale. That's what essentially you're hired. You signed up when you wanted to go into startup. It's about scaling. It's about growth. So yes, everyone wants to grow, but they usually want to do this too early. And then the company has the wrong ratio. And I totally agree that in the beginning, you should have a higher ratio of engineers to get something to the point, or engineers and product, to get to the point of product market fit, and then hire other people that can take it from there.
And actually what I would even say is, let's just take this from the idea side to inception. So if you have the idea for the startup, and you only have $50,000 in the bank, or $100,000 on your credit card, go and get the Upwork team or the remote team, and yes, pay them pay $3,000 per developer per month, get something up and running. I actually applaud that approach. Like it's kind of like it's not even an MVP. It's more like a prototype or a concept that you are proving.
Yeah, Moga.
The issue I have is when that works and your product or your idea turns into an MVP, which then turns into a product, and you still think, oh, I'm going to spend 5% of my spend on developers. Now, if it's a dev shop, the dev shop is happy. They're going to do the billable hours and their business model works.
Yes.
You're going to give them work and they're going to bill you for the hours and their business is going to thrive. Even if you're spending 5%, now you're saying, whoa, my quality went down. The team doesn't care. That is your problem.
Features take too long or something because code base
is
too bad.
We need to find a way where we can say to develop to these startups, especially the ones that what you did was amazing, well done. You were able to create a prototype or a product with less than $200,000. Well done. You're amazing. Please change your ways.
Yeah.
Please upgrade your thinking that this real spend is now going to come with more senior developers, a well-defined software development process. It's not going to be, oh, I'm going to hire more $3,000 developers, or, I'm going to fire my dev shop and go to a cheaper dev shop because no, it's none of that.
Yes.
And that's why I love this ratio idea, Stephan, because we need to provide the industry with ways to say, oh my goodness, I'm doing great. My ARR is incredible, but oh my goodness, if I look at these ratios, I'm actually signing myself up for some very serious problems 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, which, by the way, happens to be when you want to sell the company or when you want to IPO and you're like, this code is shit.
Yes. Yeah.
Ganz einfach.
So, ganz einfach. If I would be a CTO, I would look at the article, look where in which industry I am, look at the competitors there or who I want to dethrone, and then take that ratio of engineers, come to my CEO and say, you want to dethrone that company? See. Do I have your time for one more?
Please.
I have another one, which is not that. This one was nice for CTOs. Probably they get more budget. The next one is a little bit critical on CTOs. Why is this? The article has nothing to do with CTOs, essentially. I think it's called Metrics to Know Before Your Next Investor Meeting. And it's about the numbers, your revenue numbers, some metrics to know, to look prepared, to look like you're in control. You know what you're doing if you go to an investor and want some more money. And if you don't have these numbers from your head, you look like you're not managing your business. So that's the idea of the article. And I think 2 things. First, you should also, as a CTO, know about the business side of things. So you should know these numbers too. I think it's very, very important as an executive that sometimes people, CTOs, don't really get that they're that they're an executive and they need to know about the business side. It's not only tech anymore. So you should know these numbers. But the other point I wanted to make is I ask CTOs about their numbers. Like, how many open bugs do you have? How long does it take to close a bug? What's your lead time from idea to deployment? How much is the average time to fix an incident? How long does it take to hire an engineer? How many candidates do you have per job opening? They don't know.
DORA metrics.
And also DORA metrics, something that I tell people is very basic. The very basics of engineering is you should know about DORA metrics, and they don't know. So how can they be taken seriously by the CEO or by someone else if they don't look like they're in control? Yeah, and then sometimes it happens they get into due diligence and asked by an investor about these numbers in an interview, and then they struggle, and then immediately the investor thinks, I'm not sure the CTO is the right person for the job.
That is such a great point. Wow. So the article talks about knowing your revenue numbers.
Yes.
Your acquisition numbers. In other words, what is your cost per acquisition? Your website conversion rates. Your number 3 is the fundraising numbers. How much have you raised to date?
Yeah.
How much are you raising now? What were the terms in your last round? Milestone numbers. What milestones do you expect to hit with this raise? What metrics do you care about when measuring the health of your business and why? And then the 5th one here is slicing and dicing. How have your conversion rates changed over time? Have they increased, decreased? How have different customers' acquisition channels performed?
Yes. And the same thing, like these are questions from an investor to the CEO. And from my position, being a professional CTO means you know your numbers. Like I said, number of open bugs, number of how long it takes to fix a bug, lead time, all of these things, stoichiometry. You need to be in control of what you're doing. You need to be a professional, and being part of a professional is knowing what's going on.
You know, Stephan, I am so on the same page with you on this. I usually tell CTOs, in 7 CTOs, I'll say, you need to be prepared to answer any question that your team asks of you with optimism and excitement. And instead, what do I see? I see CTOs get offended. They get, if they even know the numbers, that's one thing. I don't think you have to know everything. You can go and find it. But I think you have to have an attitude that says, you can ask me any question, I don't care if you want to know how many lines of code was added to our product today. I mean, I think that's dumb. I don't think that's an accurate reflection. But if the CEO or the VP of product or some non-technical person to whom lines of code equals productivity, you and I know that that's not true. But as you are the CTO, you will do everything in your power to demystify, to help, to collaborate, to coach, to show. And unfortunately, so many of us get internally offended. We feel insecure. We feel angry. Well, why do they want to know the velocity? Velocity is a swear word these days. I mean, it's been a swear word for a long time, story points and stuff. But I think what CTOs don't understand is that's the interface that the non-technical people are coming with. And instead of getting angry, offended, or quit your job or moan about it, have the first line of defense be optimistic positivity. Yes, I'll find you the number of lines of code we added yesterday. Okay, I'll get that for you. Ha ha. Let's have a chat about why that is important to you. And by the way, let me show you why that is one line of code can be more productive than 5,000 lines of code, and do that in a fun, positive, optimistic way. But we get in our own way and in our own heads. And I think I love this approach that you've brought, which is we need to be ready to talk about these things.
Yes. And especially I love the word you used, which is demystify. I think it's very, very important to explain things, to explain technology. And if a CEO comes to you and asks about productivity, lines of code changed, you should be annoyed with yourself because you didn't explain technology and what's productivity to the CEO. So he's not the one who's to blame because he doesn't know better or she doesn't know better. They don't know better, but you are to blame because you haven't demystified the concept of productivity and technology to the CEO.
If I was sitting next to you right now, I would fill up your bierchen with
just some water.
You know what? I tell anybody who will listen that the C-suite has no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just assume that.
Yes.
Assume that they have no idea.
Yeah.
To them, you're the guy who can fix the printer, and you're the guy that makes sure that the app works. Those are the broad strokes. And I mean, of course, don't want to insult C-suites. But just assume that when someone does ask, I love what you said. If the CEO thinks that lines of code added is an indication of productivity, then that's the impression that you gave them or that you've inherited. So the ball is in your court.
Yes.
To gently, positively, optimistically update their thinking on how this stuff works, versus thinking that they're stupid and being condescending about it and then quitting because that was an opportunity you missed.
Yes. And you also made another point that I think is very important. 2 important points. The other point is about being positive and saying yes. I think CTOs are too negative in general because, yes, I understand that if something breaks, it's your head, and a lot of things break. Technology is complex, software is complex, a lot of things goes wrong. Stuff perhaps in marketing are easier to fix, but if you create some problem, website down, there is a huge problem around. So yes, I understand that you're kind of very careful for change. You better point out the problems. You better say, no, that can't be done in this way. But that's not the right time to do this. I think you need, just as you said, be positive and open, explain things to people. And then there might be a time to point out problems. But in the beginning, be more open and don't be defensive. I mean, I was a very defensive person. So
yeah, I love that. I think the vulnerability there is, I see that, brother. I think I was very defensive about these things. Very. I was very offended if my CEO was like, well, the developers are only showing up in the office at 10 a.m.
Exactly. I had the same thing. Like, why are your developers leaving at 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Marketing is leaving at 8. Why are they leaving at 6 and stuff like that?
And that's very difficult because I was hanging with a friend of mine this week, and he was telling me that his co-founders have literally said, if you're not willing to work 50% more hours than normal rates, then you're not worthy of being in our startup. And, my response in my head is that's an asshole. But then if I do some excavation on that, I have to understand that there's a construct that this person has where they equate productivity or passion with the number of hours. So that's the bug, right? That's the bug.
Yeah.
How do we fix that bug? And I think that's where CTOs especially can say, hey, this is a problem I have to solve. How can I go about presenting, showing, revealing, like you said, demystifying? How can I go ahead and show that these things can be, that there can be a different association for that?
Yes.
Also, gut gemacht?
Yes. Gut gemacht.
Haben wir gut gemacht? Ja. Denkst du, dass wir gut gemacht hattest?
I don't want to sound in any way condescending or something. That's what. So whenever I correct you, I feel bad.
No, you can always correct me. That's the only way I can learn.
But I would say something like, denkst du, dass wir das gut gemacht haben?
Denkst du, dass wir das gut gemacht haben? Haben. Yeah. And that was...
Ja, denke ich.
Und? Good.